Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, and there's so much to talk about, including with the California recall. And I want to go ahead and get right to Kara Davis. And Kara, why are you giving me that look? I don't think Kara wants to talk to me today, so I got to bring in other friends. Are you willing to talk to me today, Jeff?
Yes, and I think that's exactly how she'd be looking at you if she were here.
You got that right.
And it would be well-deserved, probably.
So, Kara's on vacation. I got to go through the list. Dr. Metzler, can I count on you to talk to me and not give me that look?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make sure. And you brought a friend, right? So I want to bring in Melanie Collette and say, welcome to Red and Black. Thank you for filling in. Please don't give me a look like that, because the woman that's usually on this show usually looks at me like that 4 or 5 times a show.
I can't make any promises. Thank you for having me, though.
Hold on, before we let her back on, I thought you said she'd be nice to me, Dr. M.
Well, she is being nice to you.
Jeff, is that being nice? Because if that's being nice, I don't know where we're going for the next 55 minutes of this show.
It's about as nice that I could expect anybody to be to you. As much as humanly possible.
Well,
I will just have to tolerate it. I
digress.
digress.
Can't put a yoke on people that they can't bear, okay?
Well, first of all, look, this is the other thing, Jeff. Before in the pre-show, you don't understand. This week, one person didn't bring their I digress juice. 2 people did. Melanie, go ahead and show off what you got over there. Go ahead.
I saw that too.
Yeah, see, Jeff, you got yours?
No, not today.
Jeff's like, no, I'm a veteran of the show. I drink before we get on camera.
That's right.
I have to be prepared and ready to go. There's only but so many dad jokes that a person can take. Which, by the way, I'm not going to sing to you, but happy belated birthday. I know your Twitter fans from around the globe have been wishing you happy birthday, turning 32 years old, and wondering, is that why your hair is even more, curlified than it usually is?
Probably, yeah. I mean, the big 3-2, it's tough. It's very tough.
So what exactly did you do for your birthday? What does a conservatarian do? What does somebody with a fresh perspective do on their 32nd birthday for the 10th year anniversary of that?
The same thing I do every day. I spent most of the day writing. But I was more relaxed when writing, if that means anything.
More cultured because of age, right?
Exactly, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Is that what it is?
Like wine, but I won't say that. I won't digress into wine. Right now, because it's just too easy. It's too easy. They just flow, folks. They just flow. Can I get into something talking about like a little bit of animosity and being nice to people and all this other jazz? I know it's a hard transition. I'm sorry, but one of the things that is both playing underneath the radar, but people are also trying to scare everybody about. And I'm going to go to Jeff first, but I'm going to keep everybody on the screen. Is the Justice for J6 rally that's coming up, which by the time this show will air, should be going into some type of mix over the course of the weekend. Jeff, we've already had some events in Washington, D.C. that didn't jump off like January 6th. January 6th was unique, okay? Yeah. But you're seeing certain elements of the media that is trying to rev people up and let them know it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And I kind of want to remind people that, the Tea Party had rallies for years without January 6th happening. Can we please come off the fact that it's not going to happen every single time more than 3 conservatives get together, aside from Red and Black, to kind of talk about their views on life?
Yeah, here's what's happening with this. They want January 6th to happen again. Don't make any mistake about it. They're not scared. They're eager. They want it to happen again. And I didn't really look into this whole rally thing, but I did see that President Trump even came out and said the people that are putting it on are only doing it to make him look bad. He thinks it's a plot. So I don't know if he's anticipating something jumping off, but realistically, January 6th was horrible. But as much as people wanted to make it sound like this was going to be an ongoing thing, as of yet, it hasn't been. I mean, even before the election, even before the inauguration, people were like, oh, yeah, Trump supporters are going to be rioting all over the place. And their prediction was sort of fulfilled, but what they promised was that there would be widespread rioting of Trump supporters, and that's just not a thing. What happened on January 6th, like you said, Lenny, that's a unique situation. That was different forces converging and resulting in that event. And I think what they want is some type of moral equivalency to the widespread rioting that was happening after the murder of George Floyd. So they want to have that equivalency, even though it's not there. That's why they try to hype up the Capitol riot so much. That's why they pretend that it's as bad or worse than 9/11 because it involved a government building. It's absurd, and I think it's one of those things where they're preaching to the choir. The only people that actually buy that are the people who want to buy it. Nobody else.
Well, Melanie, number one, January 6th was its own character. You don't have to make it much more than what it already is. But to Jeff's point, it was a unique situation that transpired in American history. But with that said, one has to ask oneself, the psyche of the country. I mean, we're literally talking about this. We just got through the 20-year anniversary of celebrating 9/11. I mean, this is a lot for a country to take in. And it's funny because we have a generation of Americans that haven't known anything other than all of this, starting with September 11th, 2001. I mean, every time we think that we're going to kind of maybe get over some things, I mean, heck, people forget about the George Floyd situation. If case in point right now, you two may know, and Dr. Metzler, I'll bring you in because you have a law degree, a medical degree,
Pardon me.
I mean, you got 7,000 different degrees. You got more degrees than an ice cube in a freezer. The thing is, though, if people need, Jeff liked that. You see how he went like, he's like, that was smooth. You thought that was smooth. Yeah, I see you. Now, listen, most people couldn't even name how many years Derek Chauvin is going to jail for. That, we're less than 2 years after the George Floyd tragedy. So the American psyche, Melanie, can't seem to take all this in without just going back to a default of being dysfunctional and broken. How do we get past this again with another thing sitting on another Saturday?
Unfortunately, we are part of a generation right now that's very easily distracted by the media. And I think that this is just another one of those distractions that's going on. You see the fencing being put back up around the Capitol, increasing the hype. You see that the Capitol Police have a big strategic plan. They've contacted the military, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like they're really blowing this thing out of proportion. On the other hand, unpopular opinion coming your way. On the other hand, as a partisan and someone who holds leadership positions in the Republican Party, I really wish that they wouldn't. I understand that those people deserve justice. I think there's other ways to do it. I feel like the left is going to use this opportunity, as they always use these opportunities, to make the right look bad, and to make Republicans look bad, and to make all of us as Republicans look like far right extremists. And, that's the problem. I think that they should wait a while before they decide to have another January 6th style rally. Now, the organizers claim that it's going to be really calm, that they don't plan to have any violence. But I think that the January 6th one wasn't supposed to be violent either. And I just think you might be inviting something that you didn't expect, and it's just going to be an opportunity for the mainstream media and those on the left to make us look bad. So I'm not loving the idea of another rally, as much as I think it's horrible that some of those people that are being held from January 6th are still in jail while they're letting murderers and rapists and thugs out on bond en masse.
Dr. Metzler, though, the issue probably for conservatives is there going to be violence there? Because there's not going to be violence there. I mean, January 6th happened one time. How many Tea Party rallies happened from Maine to California, and you didn't see people smashing up cars or anything else, let alone a government building? We won't get into the Cliven Bundy, that wasn't a Tea Party rally, everybody. Before you put it in the chat room, that was not a Tea Party. That was something completely different. You can get into the Bundys in a little bit. But Dr. Metzler, it's not the violence that the conservatives have to worry about, is it? It's the outrage and how the outrage is utilized, especially in light of, and again, Kira was giving me that look facetiously, because another winnable election was lost because rather than focusing on strategy, we focused on the outrage. And the outrage is not enough to necessarily win an election. People forget January 2016, said January, I almost went to January 6th again. 2016 was not necessarily won by Donald Trump. It was absolutely positively lost by Hillary Clinton. And that was not an outrage vote. That was a I'm sick of Hillary Clinton and the Clintons and everything else vote. And everything else since then, our outrage hasn't necessarily yielded wins or the results that we have been looking for as conservatives, right?
Well, it is the thing that I say about our party each and every time. We lose focus. Look, I would prefer that they don't have that rally, largely because we already know. Look at what's being said in the mainstream media. There is a leaked FBI memo that says that there will be violence. They're putting up the fences. The National Guard is going to be deployed. And for what? But again, I think as conservatives, we completely lose focus of the message, of the strategy. It is why Democrats are in control of the Senate at this point. While we were worrying about January 6th, Georgia was worrying about January 5th and an election that could make a difference. So I think at some point we have to stop focusing on these distractions. It's going to be what it's going to be. I don't think, there'll be anything grave that occurs. But by the same token, how many times are we going to fall into the trap set by the mainstream media? And that is exactly what's happening here.
Is this one of the, Jeff, I see you making that's it. But is this rally just another way to keep Donald Trump in the forefront of the Republican Party? And so because this was the model that got him the momentum in 15 and 16, and he used that model throughout his whole presidency. You have a segment of Republicans that are like, okay, look, you kind of want the populism, but you don't want the boisterous, lack of discipline that you get with Trumpism, because you get the populism, but you also get that too. And Republicans are trying to find that sweet spot. But the more you have these type of rallies, Jeff, doesn't this kind of almost invite you're gonna get Trump leading this type of stuff, either whether it's on social media the way he can, even through other means, or actively showing up. And as a result, you still get the populism that people want, but you also get the boisterous lack of discipline that hurts the Republican Party in elections.
Yeah, this particular rally is the reason why they call us the party of the stupid. And here's the thing. If this were just a regular rally, I wouldn't have an issue with it. I mean, because you have to have rallies. But to have a rally specifically for the people who rioted at the Capitol, that's goofy as hell. I get that some of these people are not being treated fairly. I get that. I mean, a lot of them are being treated unfairly, and there are ways to protest against that. But if doing something that just gives the left ammo is ridiculous. Just because it feels good doesn't mean it is good. We learned that lesson with the California recall. Oh, yeah. So we do have to start thinking more strategically. And on top of that, I mean, I don't know who's setting up these rallies, but I mean, I have to at least point out the possibility that it could be a grift. I mean, it's grifting season, and there's a lot of grifting going on the right. People are doing stuff like this just to get money, just to get people fired up or whatever. And like I said, I do think that it'll go off without violence, or at least without much of an issue. But again, we have to also recognize the left wants to distract from what? Afghanistan. What happened earlier this week? Dr. Metzler's favorite Biden cabinet member, Antony Blinken, got his ass kicked by the House and Senate Republicans in that hearing. So if something does pop off, that would be the perfect way to distract from the debacle that the Afghanistan withdrawal was. So I'm hoping that nothing goes down. But here's the thing: even if it doesn't, there's gonna be a lot of stupid shit said at that rally. I'm sorry that there is, and the media is going to use it as much as possible because they have to have something. And they're going to milk it for all it's worth. And to be fair, they may not succeed. They may not have enough ammo, but still, it's just the nature of this rally just seems silly to me. I think there are other ways to push back against how some of these people are being treated unfairly.
Well, and you notice Marjorie Taylor Greene is not going to be at the rally.
Really?
When this
she loves that stuff.
Yeah, well, when it first started, she was saying that she was going to be there. She's not going to be there. I don't believe Matt Gaetz is going to be there either. So,
well, then that'll decrease the likelihood that somebody will say some stupid shit that the
well, hold on. Maybe not, Melanie, because look, if they're not up there, then the people that are aspiring to be like them will. Remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene was just an activist 3 years ago. She is now a member of Congress. How did she do that? She got in front of some microphones and got in front of some cameras and said what you would call some crazy stuff, Jeff, right? I mean, so these type of rallies provide this type of opportunity. I mean, look, it's the Tea Party in some regards on steroids, Melanie, where you had some people at Tea Parties that gave some pretty decent stuff, some good stuff in speeches, talked about facts and figures, talked about the national debt, etc. Yeah. Then you had some people going up there just yelling and screaming and saying crazy things, and people, woo, I love America. And, you know, that you should run for president. And some of those people actually did run for president.
But part of the problem that the Republican Party has is that you do have the diehard Donald Trump followers that are not Republicans, that are not your run-of-the-mill regular partisan Republicans. And so when you have those kinds of people who are really populists and not grassroots Republicans, that's where you have the issue, and they lump us all in together. I can tell you, as a partisan and as somebody who's, like I said, in a leadership role, I get asked a lot of crazy stuff from people that really are these right-wing lunatics. And people believe that that's the Republican Party as a whole. Like and I'm like, I feel like I would have got the memo. I'm pretty well connected to the Republican Party. I would know if we were going to, present a coup and overthrow the government. Like, I would know. Like, they would have contacted me. I'm one of the people who's like on the list.
Yeah.
And I was not contacted about that because it's this right-wing Looney Tune, QAnon, crazy stuff that's going on. And you're lumping us in, your average Republicans, in with those people, and while they have their place, it makes it really hard for those of us who are more mainstream.
But Dr. Metzler, I understand what she's saying, and before we get to other stuff, the difference is there's a mainstream Republican that kind of has certain party positions, but that ideology has a disproportionate amount of the thought leadership chunk of the conservative movement. Those are not called partisans, they're called thought leaders. And they've been called thought leaders for 5 to 10 years. And, again, tying back to the Tea Party, when the Tea Party started really going off the rails is when, for example, they had the debt crisis, they had Obama on the ropes, and then they drove the train over the cliff, trying to prove a point rather than taking a win and methodically beating Obama and making him a one-term president if that was the goal. Instead, they went too far, lost out. Obama ended up smelling like a rose and won re-election. And then you saw similar type of mistakes. Dr. Metzler, how do you take a movement that has a lot of momentum, populism, and emotionalism, that visceral reaction that you want to have when it comes to the court of public opinion, without letting that level of lack of discipline, I'll keep saying that same phrase, being the thought leaders in the room?
Well, and that's, I think, the challenge for the Republican Party, because in fact, what you have is, as Melanie said, what you have is this bunch of lunatics who have the loudest voices. And as a result of that, what ends up happening is we're all just seen as lunatics. So the party has to take that back if we're going to have a Republican Party. Now, a number of them said, well, if you do that, I'll start another party. Okay, we'll start another party. That's fine. Good luck with that. But
Dr. Metzler and Melanie have the wine for the party, by the way. It's all good. I digress. Go right ahead.
And we're going to talk about the California recall in a minute. It is that kind of cray-cray nonsense tomfoolery. That is why we lost the election in California. And I think Jeff said it perfectly on Twitter. Essentially, Larry Elder showed up and we're done here, folks. When you're in a city, you're in a state where you're outnumbered. You are not talking to Republicans. You are talking to Democrats and independents. So you're going to go up there and talk about the Texas abortion law. You're going to talk about reparations for slave owners. Dude, what is wrong with you? But again, you had a bunch of the fringe people jump onto that and propel us into oblivion. I think a decent Republican who understood the messaging would have been able to get Newsom recalled. That is not what we had in this case. And as a result of that, we lost. And just one more thing, do not talk to me about the number of votes that were stolen and there was massive cheating. I don't want to hear it. I'm not even going there.
So let me ask this question before we go deeper into the California recall, which, by the way, our lovely Kara Davis, who is taking off this week, I promise you, she's going to have an opinion on this because that was a look she shot me. That wasn't even to me. That was when she was a gift. And that was before the recall election. So, we got some looks and some opinions. So we'll get it from her. But before we get to that, Jeff, you were to the Solutionary Summit that happened in Florida because you needed a reason to go to Florida. So yes. There you go. But with that said, is it going to be, and I'll go around the room real quick. But Jeff, I'm going to start with you. In order to really turn around the dynamic that Dr. Metzler had touched upon and Melanie touched upon, is it going to take a different type of Republican personality, or is it going to take a certain set of policies that end up winning the day? Now, there's arguments for both, because people could say, well, free market principles won the day and led the Republican Revolution of the 1980s. Yeah, Ronald Reagan had to beat Carter, and he had to beat Carter as going up against an incumbent president while he was a governor that was already out of office, that had already lost twice. His personality had to beat Carter and then go through a recession for 2 years in the early 80s before he even had a chance to lead a Republican revolution, as an example. So it kind of goes to chicken or the egg, but I'm making you pick the chicken or the egg, Jeff. Which one do you think is going to be the policies driving it and then leading the turnaround after they win, or a certain strong personality that's going to be able to bend this back the right way?
I would say short term, the personality is going to matter more. And the reason I say that is because look at how the Democrats are doing right now. They're performing badly. They're doing horribly. And I really don't believe that they're going to be able to turn it around by 2024. However, long term, having those principles and the policies are going to be the most important. But they don't matter if you don't have the right people selling them. That's one of the problems with the Republican Party and with the conservative movement in general. We are very good at complaining. We are very good at refuting the left's arguments. We are very good at pointing out where they go wrong, but we are horrible when it comes to talking about what should be done instead of what the left is proposing. So if there's an issue like poverty, the left is going to want to do more government, Green New Deal, infrastructure, all that. And we sit there and say, that's wrong, that sucks, that's lame, that's ridiculous, here's why. And then we shut up. Instead of saying, these things suck. And by the way, here's a better way to do this using free market principles, using the principles of liberty. We don't do that, and we don't do that nearly enough. We should be focusing more on what we bring to the table than what the bad guys are doing. Yeah, we still got to criticize. Yes, we have to. That's part of politics. But we will never win long term until people know us more for what we're for than what we're against. So yes, we need to make sure we're elevating the right people. And I'm not even just talking about in politics as far as politicians go. I'm talking about in the media, our influencers. We need a total revamp, a total reimagining on how the conservative movement approaches politics, because this isn't the 80s anymore. This is not the 90s. This isn't even the 2000s. We are entering into a new age, and that is evidenced by the fact that Trump even won in 2016 in the first place. Mm-hmm. So we do have to start doing something different. And I think that if it's done the right way, we will have a hybrid of more of the regular Tea Party Republican and the more Trumpy America First type of person. Yeah. People bring up Ron DeSantis all the time. That style, even though I'm not really much of a fan of Ron DeSantis, that style, I think, is what's going to help us move forward. It still needs some tweaking, but at the same time, that's how we move forward instead of just doing things like we always have done them.
I think one thing that I want to note before I go to Melanie and ask that same question, it's interesting you said more of the mainstream Republican, and then you picked Tea Party and Trumpian, and one could make a case that wasn't a Republican 15 years ago. In fact, neither one of those two things was a Republican 15 years ago. But the fact that you said that made me go, oh, it's kind of interesting that you're calling that more of a mainstream Republican. That kind of talks about the shift in politics. But I don't want to stay there because we can go into that for 10, 15 minutes. But Melanie, let me ask you the same question. What's going to turn around the shift for Republicans, chicken or egg? Is it the strong personality that bends it back, or is it strong policies that have some big wins, and then that gets people to kind of chase that shiny object and move away from what they've been chasing with the Trumpian populism over the last 5 to 6 years?
You know, I think it's going to be personality, and I hate to say that. Like, I hate that it's going to be personality, and the reason why, I don't take the word hate like I lightly. Like, I use that word because it's a strong word, but I hate the fact that I think it's going to be personality because it's a very non-intellectual argument. But I'll tell you, I first got a whiff of the fact that Trump might lose in 2020 when I was canvassing for some Senate candidates. And of course, because it was a presidential year, we asked the Trump question because that's what the company that we were using was doing surveys. And a lot of Republicans were saying that they didn't like Trump's personality. And that they didn't think they were going to vote for him again. And I was hoping that maybe that wasn't a sign of things to come. But it worried me that when I was, like I said, I was canvassing for other candidates, that's the feedback I was getting regarding Trump. Unfortunately, we live in a society that's very emotional. Democrats are very good at playing on people's emotions. And Republicans come off as mean. I think I'm a really nice person, but when I talk policy, I come off as mean, and I'm as sensitive and warm and fuzzy as they come. I'm telling you. But when I talk policy, I come off as mean because to me, policy is an intellectual argument. And it was very disappointing to see people who voted for Trump before not vote for him in 2020 because of his personality. It was a very non-intellectual argument and quite frankly, just stupid. Because now look what we have. So I think that it needs to be presented in a smiley, kind, fuzzy way. And I hate all of that because really the policies has nothing to do with that. The policy has to do with the border. The policy has to do with Afghanistan. The policy has to do with inflation. The policy has to do with all of that stuff, none of which has anything to do with whether or not somebody's mean tweeting that morning.
Yeah, but Dr. Metzler, I've seen you agree with both of them in that it's going to be the personality more than the policies. And part of this is politics. You got to sell it. They're salesmen, they're saleswomen. I get that. Again, one can make the argument that Trump had never held a political office before in his life. Hillary Clinton seemed to have held every political office in her life, whether she had it officially or she told Bill Clinton, I'm going to do this. What are you going to do about it? Whatever. So, I mean, look back to her healthcare plan in the 1990s when she had no official position. And yet, I didn't digress yet. What the heck's wrong with you? But
I did.
Yeah, apparently. I forgot. You're Dr. Metzler, the man who has done everything. You can do what you want. But you don't. You're the guest. You can't be drinking when he drinks.
My bad. Protocols. I apologize.
There are Metzler rules. You know what I mean? Have you not watched the Metzler Minute? Have you not seen a message from Metzler or any of that other stuff?
That's true.
Anywho, there's always a sales point of this, right, Dr. Metzler? But are we saying that it's going to be even still that much more? Because I got to ask the question then, did the model of policies over anything else break with Bill Clinton playing the saxophone on our Arsenio Hall show in 1992, or with Barack Obama giving a speech in 2004, which led to 2008, or coming down the escalator steps in 2015? Because if that's the case, I don't know how much we bend this back towards policies and good substance from government in a limited capacity.
Well, since we no longer teach civics in school, it's very clear to me that the personality has to come first. That's number one. But number two, to a point Jeff made earlier, here is why it can't be policy first, because as Republicans, we can pick out what's wrong. But imagine us trying to say, here is what I'm going to do. Here is how it's related. Here is how it's going to impact your life. No, that's not clickbait stuff. So we're not going to do that. So that would be a disaster. So it's got to be personality first, and then you put the policies in place. But it is the power of the personality. And also remember, we are living in the social media environment where personality is all that matters. I'm not going to sit here and listen to your policy on regressive tax policy. I don't care about that. How does it impact me? And that's the reality.
And quite frankly, Dr. Metzler, to your point, I think particularly, persons like myself and you who are academics have a tendency to explain the minutia of policy and the details behind economics. And people, at the risk of sounding condescending, the electorate at large is not absorbing that.
Nope.
That's not condescending at all. That's not condescending.
Hold on. Before you say something, number one, at the risk of sounding condescending, then you just got to talk down to the rest of us, which, by the way, was the rest of us. Because did you notice, Jeff, that she said, academics like you and me, Dr. Metzler, she
only because we're educators. I only
did you notice that?
Right. I'm not an academic.
I mean, but that was her way of kind of, Dr. Metzler, us folks that really know what's going on.
At the risk of sounding condescending, here comes like a really condescending comment.
Because it just, look, that Davidson College degree kicked in for like 30 seconds, and I caught that.
No, but here's the thing. I mean, here's a subject that I do know a lot about. I mean, when we're talking about personalities, really what we're talking about here is persuasion, right?
Yes.
So when you have the right policies, you still have to be able to sell them.
Yep.
Like let's say if Laney and I both sell cars, and I'm selling Ferraris for I don't know $500, and Lenny's selling a hoopty. If Lenny is a better salesperson and I don't know how to sell at all, guess who's going to get the deal? He is.
Well, it's you, because you still got the good hair.
So, but that figures into persuasion. But let's say that I had my hair all nasty and whatever, like the normal black conservative hairline and all that, then that might figure into it.
Then I would, exactly.
Yeah, you can have a superior product, but if you don't know how to sell it, you're going to go out of business. It doesn't matter how great it is. So we do need to, and that's one of the pluses about Trump. He's a great salesman. That's why that's one of the reasons he won in 2016. He got people to vote against Hillary.
Right.
But to Melanie's point, I think people just got sick of his personality and it became less persuasive. COVID didn't help as well, but still, he still made, even though he's a master persuader, doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't have flaws. And I think that's why people want a Trump-like figure without his weaknesses. There was a poll that I just wrote about, actually, that 51% of Republicans think that they will have a better chance of winning in 2024 if Trump runs again. 49% of Republicans think that we'll do better if we have a different candidate. Mind you, both camps like Trump. Both camps like his policy in general, maybe not his personality, but they differ. But they differ in how they want to approach it. And I'm hearing a lot of people saying, you know, I like Trump, I like what he did, but I think it's time for somebody new, and I think Trump should transition into more of a different role. So the persuasion factor is arguably the most important thing, because your policies, as beneficial as they are, they won't matter until you persuade people to embrace them.
And so, well, I'm going to stay with you as the native Californian. So it's interesting that you would talk about persuasion, because if you look at this picture right here, you know, this wasn't supposed to work. I mean, we were laughing about this, if you recall. We were laughing about how effective the vice president going to California would be. You know, we were talking about Gavin Newsom being behind the curve on the polls. But going back to Dr. Metzler's point, if you're not persuasive, even though you have the facts on your side, you will not get the conviction. And in this instance, the conviction was recalling Gavin Newsom. As we look at California, we'll do it over the course of 2 shows. What one thing stuck to you when you saw that he was going to win by darn near a 2-to-1 vote on election night? Jeff.
Are you talking to me? Oh, you know, at first, I mean, I'd say a couple months ago, I was more optimistic about the recall election. And yeah, I'm going to say when Larry Elder got in and became the front runner, it was very hard for me to be optimistic. I was born and raised in Southern California, and I know that Californians were not going to like Larry Elder. And I mean, there's a host of reasons why. I mean, the baggage and all that, but realistically, it's like Kira pointed out, nobody knows who Larry Elder is outside of right-wing circles. And in California, you can't do the same things that give conservatives the tingle up their leg, like Sonny Johnson would say, and expect that same thing to transfer over to independent and maybe even more conservative Democrats in California. There was no way he was going to be able to appeal to them, and he gave the Democrats the perfect foil. And if you notice, their messaging on this whole recall thing was horrid before Larry Elder. And normally Democrats are great at messaging, but once he got in and he became the front runner specifically, they had somebody that they could use. They can turn him into another picture of Trump. They can dig up all the silly things he said, all the offensive things he said about the Black community, the offensive things that he said about women, about how they exaggerate the impact of domestic violence and sexism. They can dig all that up because over the years, he has said a lot of incendiary things that were designed, frankly, to appeal to white conservatives.
Yeah.
And that's why I said earlier, just because somebody feels good to you doesn't necessarily mean that they're the right person to put up against the Democrats, especially in California.
And Melanie, and even bigger than that, Jeff said, you know, his messaging was more for white conservatives. I'll take it even deeper than that. His messaging was to get people who either loved him or hated him to tune into him, to listen to him on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And this is one of the interesting things that people often, again, fail to realize about somebody like Trump, is the fact that more often than not, and, you know, Dr. Metzler, don't laugh when you hear this because it's an inside joke, you'll laugh. Media personalities don't usually win elections. You're allowed to laugh now. Because they usually end up saying something as a media personality, and then when they get into a position of a candidate, they're not really good at explaining, well, you know, I just said that because it was 8:15 on my radio show. We had no callers, and I needed to say something to get the sponsors happy. Which, let's just be honest, some of this stuff that Larry Elder said, either he's a complete jerk, or some of these things he said because he needed to keep the sponsors happy, and at 8:15, there were no phone lines, and he said the magic phrases and they came in. Once you do that, and you don't know how to spin out of that, Melanie, it is an albatross. It's very hard to get off from around your neck.
Absolutely. And I could imagine, you know, somebody of a media personality of his caliber has said a lot of things. It's a very dangerous thing. I'm a media personality of a way smaller caliber, and every time I'm approached about running for something, I'm like, yeah, too many skeletons. Skeletons just fly out. As soon as I'm talking, I've talked too much. I've written too much. Like, it's just not. I've run once, and on my Facebook page, I had that the deepest thing I read is an O magazine. An obvious joke, I would think that would be an obvious joke. And someone put it in the paper. It was a local election I was running for, and they were like, "Do we really want to elect a person who doesn't read anything deeper than O magazine?"
Not in the era of Sarah Palin. Not in the era of Sarah Palin.
Right. So, like,
y'all need to leave Sarah Palin alone.
Happens. So I'm like, never, ever again. But so you can imagine on a scale like a state election, like California, and all the things that he has said over the years, that just was not going to end well. But let's not forget about the fact that also media personalities do that, knowing it's going to be a losing proposition just to raise their profile. Like, let's not be naive about that factor. There are many people who run knowing that they're going to lose just to raise their profile and make more money.
But I ain't saying he a clout chaser.
That's right. Clout chasing, grifting.
Yeah, but the difference is when you are trying to raise your profile, Dr. Metzler, and initially you can't get on the ballot like Larry Elder, you don't fight to get on the ballot anyway. Right? That's kind of when you're like, I raise my profile. That's your way to both say that you tried to get in a race, but then went back to the safe space, and you get to leverage both sides of it. It's kind of like what people thought Trump was going to do in 2015. People forget part of the whole escape hatch that people thought Trump was going to use is as soon as they asked him for his taxes, that's when he was going to leave the race. But he was able to stay in because once he realized, oh, you're really not going to make me give you my taxes? Why leave? But usually they build something in. Larry Elder didn't take that, Dr. Metzler. So it kind of, if worst case scenario, he was both I'm kind of serious candidate, but not really. And that was just enough, to Jeff's point, to kind of really damage the recall efforts for those that wanted Newsom out.
Yeah, but look, as it relates to Larry Elder and in this particular race, the fact that he, quote unquote, fought to get on the ballot, in fact, emboldened many people. See, he's not a quitter. He's not a loser. We know they're going to steal anyway, and they're just trying to keep him off the ballot. And, in addition to which, it was a grift. It continues to be a grift. And so let's just be clear about what's happening here. And, people criticize me all the time for saying it, but you know what? Kick rocks. A grift is a grift is a grift.
Don't you wish you were making all the money that people accuse you of making?
I know.
Me too.
I'm waiting.
I would be a billionaire many times over.
Me too.
Dr. Metzler and Melanie make their wages in wine, but I digress. So you don't have to worry about those two. Let me throw this out there to everybody. I'm going to get to Nicki Minaj before we leave. Not necessarily her in her comment, but the bigger story behind it, I think, anyway. What does this in 2021 say about the Republican Party? Because the last time we talked about recalls with the Republican Party, we had the unions forcing their might behind a recall effort with Scott Walker, who should have been recalled. People forget, during the early 2010s, he should have been recalled. They went after him multiple times and couldn't get rid of him. He was able to stay there and run for president. This was a dude that did not graduate from college when he was climbing the ranks as a politician, and had these powerful unions and the unions in Illinois right across the border trying to shove him out. 10 years later, you have a vulnerable governor who's been a hypocrite during the pandemic, who had the impact of the economy and other things going on in California, and they couldn't push him out the door. Starting with the native Californian Jeff, what does this mean for the Republican Party, if it means anything for the Republican Party? Because a California Republican and a California Independent is much different than what those two entities look like across the rest of the country.
I would say that even though there was a loss and it was a significant loss, there's still something we can pull out of this. Mm-hmm. For a while, for a long time, the Democrats were scared. Newsom was scared. A few weeks ago, I was on a radio show with a very left-wing progressive host, and she said, I'm terrified. I'm scared that Newsom is going to get recalled. So they knew that there was a possibility. And again, I think they would have been even more scared if somebody like Kevin Kiley or Kevin Falconer were the front runner. Yep. With Larry Elder, they knew how they could use that, but they were afraid. It shows that this type of grassroots effort can actually make a difference, even in a state like California. Yes, there are 2 Democrats for every 1 Republican. But again, we have to remember, not all of those Democrats are far to the left. You've got moderate Democrats. You've got some conservative Democrats. You've got your independents. Also, what I pulled out of it is that 23% of Black men and 45% of Hispanic men voted to recall Newsom. Now, the majority still voted to keep him, but those numbers are higher than they should be, which tells me that there is also an opportunity for the Republican Party. It's just yet another indicator that they have an opportunity right now to make inroads with the Black community and with Hispanics. It's just one of several. I mean, you had the New York City Democratic primaries, how Eric Adams won. You had the fact that President Trump increased his Black and Hispanic support. So now is the time that we need to start taking this more seriously and actually becoming a bigger tent instead of just pretending like we're a big tent. And actually put the work in. So there are positives about this, but here's the thing, there are only positives if the Republican Party actually capitalizes on them. Now, I always say the Republican Party never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Mm-hmm. They need to prove me wrong on that. Like, that needs to happen, or else we won't have any positive change. And this whole thing about people saying, oh, don't just give up on California. I can't stand you people. That, like, you guys are doing exactly what the Democrats want. You might as well be a Democrat, because you're telling us to do what the Democrats want us to do. Mm-hmm. No, you don't give up. You lean in. You fight smarter. You use your resources more wisely instead of just putting them in races where you're comfortable, because there's only going to be a certain amount of time before the Democrats come for those areas too. And by the way, it is happening in Texas and in Georgia. So put your heads out of your asses.
Melanie, before I go over to you to ask you that question, as far as what can we learn from that, Democrats usually come back to us and say, when they say give up on California, it's full of Democrats, it's a hopeless cause. And we say jump back in the game. You can also say to the Republicans and conservatives, we'll kind of engage the left in California the way we need to. You all should probably be focusing on your minority efforts and stop telling people to give up on Democrats in California. Everybody has a segment of the American population that they've just been like, we'll never get them. I mean, the same argument we say about California is what we often end up saying about Blacks and Latinos. They're never going to vote for us in the inner city.
I pointed out that people like Ben Shapiro are sounding just like Barry Goldwater did when he said the Republican Party should stop reaching out to Black people. It's the same thing. Yeah. We haven't learned our lesson. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll tell you what. I don't know what the answer is as far as reaching out to minorities. I had this conversation with a friend of mine who happens to be Hispanic and Republican just last night. And I was saying to her that in my county, we have like one minority area. We reach out to them regularly, and they regularly give us their behinds to kiss every single year. It doesn't matter how much we do, no matter how much outreach we do, they completely ignore us, diss us, don't invite us to their churches, and we reach out to them regularly. I will say that I am frustrated. I'm very frustrated with those communities, but I'm also a person who did not grow up in a predominantly minority community. I grew up in a community that's predominantly white, so maybe I'm not the person, and I think that's the mistake that Republicans make. They'll look at me and say, invite me to the table, wanting to know how they can reach out to the Black community. I'm like, well, I grew up in a white community. How would I know? I don't know. That's why my neighbors are white.
Let me go to you real quick. What can we learn from California? Because I do want to talk about Nicki Minaj, and we're about to run out of time. Is there anything we can extrapolate from California as Republicans, or is this such a unique situation because it's California that we shouldn't make it more than just a Democrat kept his office?
Yeah, here's what we learned as it relates to Black Republican candidates in particular. Do not nominate. You want Herschel Walker to run for Senate in Georgia, he is going to lose. If Vernon Jones runs for governor, Stacey Abrams will be governor. We need to stop with this nonsense. In addition to which, when we talk about Black or minority outreach, what we need to do is stop. And many of our grifters, Black conservative, stop telling the Black community how stupid they are and then expect them to vote for you. That doesn't work. We accuse Democrats of having racist policies. The fact that we are continuously nominating these folks, look, Reverend Warnock will wipe the floor with Herschel Walker in Georgia. This is Georgia. And by the way, Herschel, you're talking about voter fraud. Your wife did an absentee ballot to vote in Atlanta when you've lived in Texas all your life. Hello, voter integrity, and you're going to be come on, stop.
So let me get to Nicki Minaj 1 minute, and I'm going to have this be like a primer for Twitter conversation, chat room conversation, and maybe even next week. And Melanie, I'm going to go to you first very, very quickly before we end the show. I don't want to talk about what she said or even the graphic nature of what she said, because there's enough people making memes and all that stuff about that. Don't look at me like that. I'm being serious. You're going to make get right out of the bottle if we go down that path. I don't want to do that. But with that said, isn't there a danger to somebody with that much of a platform, regardless of who it is, still purporting to be these experts? It's funny, Dr. Metzler always talks about the Facebook lawyers that got their law degrees by way of the Zuckerberg School of Law. Isn't this just another example that whether you agree with Nicki Minaj, don't agree with her, or anything in between, that this is, again, sadly, where America is now?
Yes, it is. And can we, as Republicans or Trump supporters or conservatives or however, whatever group you want to identify with, because that's what we do these days, can we not put mega hats on them and welcome them to the Republican Party? Can we not do that? Can we just agree with like one person's opinion, like find common ground on one opinion without welcoming them into the party? Like we are like the thirstiest party ever. We're like that thirsty dude that I just glance in his direction and he thinks we're getting married. Like, no, we're not. That's not how it works.
We're like simps.
Can we calm down? Yes, we're political simps.
We'll be simping.
Like, stop it.
When Tucker Carlson, Nicki, retweets you, that's not a good thing, okay? Let us not, that is exactly right. These folks and her fans are not Republicans. They're not conservatives. They never will be.
No.
What is wrong with y'all?
Yes, settle down. Calm down.
Jeff, would you like to repeat that before we go? Because it's going to be very hard.
I can't say it any better than that. Like we need to stop simping. I'm not the shut up and dribble type. I don't do that. You know, celebrities can say what they want, and we can agree with and refute their arguments. But don't tell people to shut up and dribble and say we don't care about what celebrities think, and then get all googly-eyed because Nicki Minaj agrees with us on something.
We Republicans nominated and backed a celebrity who was a celebrity host of a show on a network and made him the nominee for their party for president twice and won once.
And we'll do it again if he runs again.
And absolutely.
All right. We can talk about this for a while. Gotta go. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us and filling in.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
And you were kind to me. Jeff, by the way, the answers are a lot better if you drink a lot of wine during the show. Dr. Metzler's been trying to tell you. Now I got a second person to try to warn you about this. Can you please take the hint? Thank you.
Maybe.
Melanie, what do you got going on this week? Where can people find you on social media real quick?
At NJGOP Diva. That's where you can find me on Twitter. My mayor named me that years ago at the NJGOP Diva, and so that is my Twitter handle. If I have some space, Mimi Teresa, that's my super secret Facebook page. Hang out with me there, and you can follow me on Instagram at Melanie T. Collette.
But if you go to the super secret page, you might get in some type of super secret trouble, and that might make certain things grow that shouldn't grow, according to Nicki Minaj. I digress. Dr. Metzler,
what kind of page
what do you got going on this week?
I just doing my thing, helping Black businesses succeed and all minority businesses with a big effort in the city of New York. More to come on that.
Fantastic. I didn't think you Black conservatives actually liked Black people, so that's actually surprising to hear. Dude with the good hair, and it was just your birthday. Real quick, what you got going on this week with your fresh perspective and all?
Yes, still got a fresh perspective with Jeff Charles. I just did a fire interview earlier today. I'm going to be getting back on my audio podcast as well, so go ahead and download that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Still got my live streams on YouTube every Tuesday and Friday evening at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard. Holla at your boy.
Yeah, holler at your boy. Keep in touch with us. Continue to tell people to follow Red and Black. We're continuing to work on the format. Melanie, thank you for joining us and filling in this week. We look forward to you all following us. Thank you for all the comments in the chat room. And in the meanwhile, make sure you're tweeting us up, sharing the word, keeping safe, and staying blessed. In the meanwhile, we'll talk to you again next week. You know we love you. Take care of yourselves. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.